My name is Andy Caygeon Junkin, and I help stubborn farmers work better together. And I don't expect anybody to understand what that means. To my knowledge, there's nobody doing what I do across North America, but hopefully in an hour you understand what I'm doing. You see, I'm a 7th generation farm boy from a little town called Caygeon, Ontario, Canada. And when I went to agriculture college, everybody called me Bob Caygeon. Still to this day, everybody in Western Ontario calls me Caygeon. When I went to college, I didn't care about you knowing my name. I cared about you knowing the fact that I came from Bob Caygeon. I was very proud of where I was from. And I think it said it all. And the dean of the agriculture college said, "Who the hell is crazy enough to farm in Bob Caygeon?" And I come from the edge of the world, basically. I come from just on the edge of the Canadian wilderness. And what caused my family to be successful for 7 generations is the fact that they were stubborn. And what caused my family to fail is the fact that we were stubborn. And I'm hell-bent to make sure that the hell that my family went through, you folks don't go through, by helping stubborn farmers work better together. And to be honest with you, 25 years ago, if you had asked me if I had a choice between speaking in front of a bunch of people or getting a colonoscopy, I think I'd probably pick the colonoscopy. I hate public speaking. It's actually my weakness. So you have to bear with me. I hope you get something out of it, and we can improve the odds of your family still getting together on the farm for Christmas in 25 years' time as a result of it. And my question to you folks is what's the biggest change we've had in technology in farming in the last 50 years? What's the biggest change we've had in technology in farming in the last 50 years? Don't all speak at once.
Yield monitoring.
Yield monitoring, what else?
GPS.
GPS, what else?
Cell phone.
Cell phone. You guys are all right, okay? But I'm here today to give you guys a different perspective. And from my perspective, the biggest change we've had in technology in farming in the last 50 years is the fact that fewer farmers are dropping dead of heart attacks in their 60s than back in the 1960s. Now, modern health sciences is a game changer in a way that we haven't really thought through. Now, for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm not going to talk about the impact that Viagra has on succession planning. But what I am going to talk to you about in succession planning is the fact that back in the 1960s, when Dad was 60, he would retire because his hips were shot. Nowadays, Dad's going in for hip surgery if he's got bad hips in his 60s, and he's farming to his 80s or 90s. And if you want to farm till you're 92, you're my kind of guy, and I want to make that happen. But the conundrum we have is suddenly in the shop, instead of there being 1 generation farming, we got 3 generations farming together. And because this equipment we just talked about, this technology, you need that in order to have a competitive edge to be able to farm. So it doesn't make sense every 25 years to be splitting up the capital between families. Got to keep it all together. So suddenly we've got 3 generations farming together, and we got 2, 3 siblings or cousins farming together. And I know that you never heard this term before, but on too many farms in the shop, we got too many chiefs, what? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And it's a big joke. We're obviously joking about the neighbors, right? They're not talking about your farm. They're just talking about the neighbor's farm when they use that phrase, too many chiefs. But it's no joke. This is the conundrum that causes grown men to cry. You know, on too many farms, we're butting heads and pulling farm in different directions, and we're going nowhere fast. You know, and I believe this phrase to be true, even though we haven't put the scientific research into this. On most family farms, miscommunication and egos affects a farm's bottom line more than markets and weather altogether. You know, on too many farms, we're butting heads and pulling farm in different directions, and money slipping between the cracks. And you can probably think about the last couple of years, you had some sort of butting of heads on your farm, and some bad decisions were made because everybody was trying to be smarter than the other guy. But what we haven't really probably recognized is that on a lot of days you try to get along with everybody. And you've got your areas of responsibility, your partners have their responsibilities, And your partners mean well, they go to work every day trying to do the best that they can do, but they may not be self-aware of some mistakes that they're making. And you just don't want to rock the boat by pointing out an area that they're insufficient because it might cause World War III. And as a result, critical things don't get addressed. And the decision to not make a decision is a decision itself. So we're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. We're losing money between the cracks in a huge way. And I believe on most family farms, miscommunication and egos is affecting the farm's bottom line more than the markets and weather altogether. Now, we talk about mental health these days, and you know it's true that next to war veterans, farmers have one of the highest suicide rates. Mental health is a huge problem across rural America right now. And we blame the markets, we blame the weather, and those are factors. But nobody's really looked at the root issue of how many times are you butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions? How many times are you going home stressed out because you can't make decisions together? It's creating dysfunctional farms, it's creating dysfunctional families, and it's freaking killing us on so many different levels. And it all because we can create my website, stubborn.farm. There was a lot of jokes with my friends as to what we could say about the situation. But it's no joke. We could spend half an hour talking about describing situations behind the barn. And a lot of cuss words would probably be said. But it all comes down to one word, and that one word is the fact that we're stubborn. Now, who has a phone and can Google for me the definition of stubborn? Can somebody pull up their phone and Google for me the definition of stubborn? 15 years ago, after things didn't work out with my family, my parents got divorced as a result, I started mediating family disputes across North America, hell-bent to save as many family farms as I could. What's the definition of stubborn?
Difficult to move, remove, or cure.
Difficult to remove. What's the other definition of stubborn?
Having or showing dogged determination not to change one's attitude and position on something, especially in spite of good arguments or reasons to do so.
Now, I know that we're talking about the neighbors, not your family. But what I was seeing, when I started meeting family disputes, I didn't realize the similarities that situation had with people that were marriage counselors. You have to forgive the Canadian accent there. Anyways, the thing is that when most people go to the marriage counselor, the overwhelming majority of people who go to marriage counselors are divorced within 4 years. You look up the stats. Within 4 years, the majority of people go to marriage counselor. You might as well call them a divorce counselor. Because all that's happening is everybody's going to that meeting, and while their partner is explaining to them what they're doing wrong, you're thinking about your rebuttal. You're not actually listening to what they have to say, looking at ways to improve yourself. And that's the same thing with family farms. There was a situation this is 15 years ago, and there was two brothers, and they were best men in their wedding, each other's weddings. And there's two sister-in-laws at the kitchen table, and they hated each other. And here's Grandma at the end of the kitchen table crying. And what had happened was Dad had run that farm with an iron fist. And with the vacuum of leadership, they couldn't make decisions together for about 10 years. And the two sister-in-laws were actually best friends in high school. But they had 10 years of butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. And they lost money, and they lost their relationships as a result. And there was this kid, and he was about 16 years of age, and he was showing a 4-H calf. And I had met him just before I walked in that meeting. And I swear to God, this kid got up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day to milk cows and couldn't wait to get off the school bus to go milk cows. Do you guys know of a kid like that in your community? What's 4-H about? What is 4-H about? Anybody here a 4-H leader? I'm the one that's supposed to be shy in front of crowds, guys. What is 4-H about? What's that?
The kids.
It's about the kids, but what are we trying to teach our kids? Learn to do by doing, right? Self-improvement. How many people would say self-improvement's a big thing? Right? The environment of the farm is just supposed to be bringing out the best in the kid. The challenge of learning to do by doing. And here the kid was out there in the yard trying to self-improve, using the farm environment to become a better man. And inside that kitchen, the farmer was bringing out the worst in everybody. This was an amazing family. They had a really good operation, but more importantly, they were highly respected pillars in the community. And here they were, one guy was a church deacon, the other guy was a church elder. And here they were very well respected people, good Christian farm family, the neighbors would say, but they were being anything but Christian with each other in that moment. And nobody cared about what that kid, his future was. In 10 years' time, there wouldn't be a farm for him to farm, even though he lived it. Everybody was concerned about their pride, and as a result, they weren't going to have a farm to be proud of. And on the table, this is a Dutch Reformed family. They read the Bible 3 times a day. And the words written in red in that Bible on the kitchen table were Matthew 7:5. And it says, "You hypocrite, first take the speck of dust out before you take the speck of dust out of your brother's eye, take the plank out of your own." Now, I don't care if you're an atheist or you're a Christian Scientist or whatever. Those are wise words. And that's the only way that a family farm is going to succeed. And that's the foundation of my business. We got to get families to stop pointing fingers at each other. And we got to start looking at the 3 fingers pointing back at us. And the principle, that's Matthew 7:5 is the principles of my business. It comes down to 3 things. We got to improve how families make decisions together. We got to continuously improve how we work together. And then we got to turn our weaknesses into our strengths. And back in 2019, February 1st, I'll give you an example farm I work with. I got a call. I had met a guy at a conference speaking in Montana, and they had won Farm Family of the Year for their state. And this is a real family. We'll call them Black Family. That's not the real family name, but this is a real deal, and I'll try to keep things as vague as possible. But essentially, they had won the Farm Family of the Year for their state. Except for behind the barn, there was a lot of bickering. And everybody wanted to hear this guy speak because there's 5 siblings and cousins farming together. How the hell do you do that? Well, the truth was, behind the barn, it just didn't work. And they had a situation where the banker, they were the bank's largest client. The banker kept on seeing some shenanigans and saying, this stuff has to get addressed. They ignored that. February 1st, 2019, the CEO of that farm called me up, and he said, "We lost your financing." I said, "How much was it?" $17 million. I got him financing within 10 days. My wife gets ugly with me sometimes, very rarely, but she keeps on reminding me I could make a hot tub. We could be sitting in a hot tub if I charge a sales commission on things like this. The thing is, I don't sell life insurance. I don't sell financial products. I don't take a commission on finding money for situations like that. All I do is help starving farmers work better together. But I got them temporary financing for 2 years. We got them 2% higher interest rate from basically a loan shark, so that they could get their ducks in order. And what I did was I walked on the farm, and there's 2 brothers in an argument about who was using the skid steer that hour. Swear to God. The right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing in that operation. And I walked in there, and they expect me to be Dr. Phil at first, right? And I don't get guys to hold hands and sing Kumbaya because that freaks out farmers. So we just focused on profitability. I said, okay, we got to figure out how we're going to turn around the situation on your operation. And the first thing they wanted to do was, one guy wanted to fire the CEO. One guy wanted to sell a chunk of land that was piss poor land, in his view. One guy wanted to get rid of the cows. And, you know, who here is a Boy Scout leader? Is anybody here in Boy Scouts? Used to be. Okay, so when you used to be a Boy Scout, did they teach you to start with the big logs first, or do you start with the kindling? I said to the lads, I said, guys, you know, you guys are you're trying to start a fire using the big logs first. We got to start with the kindling. The problem here is not the problems you guys are dealing with as far as getting rid of the cows or getting rid of some land. The problem is that you guys suck at problem solving itself. We have a situation where we have 5 guys that are incredibly smart. You don't need some consultant to come fly in to tell you how to farm. The problem is that you guys are all having this I'm smarter than you attitude. You guys are talking over top of each other instead of listening to each other. We got to fix that. That's what we got to fix. So I set a rule. For the next 6 months, we're not going to take everybody has to come to the table every 2 weeks with one idea to improve farm profit, and it can't cost more than $1,000. But it's got to return 300% of what you put into it. So if it costs $1,000, you got to return at least $3,000. And so we had 5 guys come to the table with different ideas. And one of the ideas within the first couple of weeks was they had a feedlot, and they'd have a bunk full of feed, but it'd be out of reach of the cattle by noon. Nobody was pushing up feed. And there's 3 guys involved in the feedlot. And you want to talk about 20 minutes of bickering as to who is blame, and all they wanted to do was shift blame on, now I know this happens to the neighbors, not your farm, right? But the thing is, all they wanted to do was talk about the blame. Who was to blame? Nobody wanted to talk about how we're going to fix the problem. Right? Instead of pointing fingers at each other, what are the 3 fingers pointing at me? How do we improve our systems so we don't have this production problem? And you have 5 guys come to the table with simple ideas like that, and you have 25 meetings over the course of a year. You wouldn't believe how much more profitable that operation is. Right? And then the other 2 things I simply did, each meeting I had one improvement in how they work together. One improvement in how they work together. So simply for them, most farms I start with, coffee on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, plan out the week. Sunset, have a phone call. How is the plan that we had on Monday by Wednesday night going to change because we had a breakdown on Wednesday afternoon? Talk about how the plan for Thursday is a little bit different. So the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. I don't know if you guys ever get frustrated with your partners not knowing what the hell they're doing, but how many of you guys know when you get out of bed what your partner's planning to do for the day? And how many frustrations does that cause by mid-noon because you're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions? If you make one improvement like that a week over 25 weeks, it's unbelievable how much different your operation is. And the third thing is I just had each partner make one improvement in character. Now, I know you guys don't have this issue, but this family had an anger management issue, right? And they had certain ways that they reacted to things. There's 16 cognitive distortions, different ways you can see some things. Like for their farm, what they had a bad habit as a family was turning a molehill into a mountain. I know that you guys don't have that in your operation, right? But the thing is, we made one improvement. For the first 6 months, we just looked at family traits. What do we have in common that are bad character habits that we've got to turn from a weakness into a strength? In the last half of the year, we focused on, I talked one-on-one to each individual. And if you made 3 improvements in each meeting, and you have 25 meetings, that's over 75 improvements to their operation. And they were 300% different operation as a result. We sat down in August, and we had a meeting. Remember, they couldn't decide who was going to use a skid steer that afternoon. We had a meeting, and it was 3 hours. And we sold 10% of the land. We did a very complex deal, but because we had started with the kindling first and then worked our way up to the fire, we had a 3-hour meeting. We had a 90-minute meeting 2 weeks later, and then it was a 20-minute discussion, and it was a done deal. They sold 10% of the land, And they put $250,000 from the land sale into starting up a niche market crop that one of the guys had come up with in one of our meetings. And when it was first mentioned, it was a dumb idea. But you had 5 very smart guys with look at things different ways. And as a result, they all added to that idea, and it turned out today. So that was February 1st, 2019 when I first met them. Last September, the CEO was on a podcast, and he was stating, and it's true, he told me this at Christmas himself, they don't have enough land to grow this niche market crop. They own over 10,000 acres. They're making 5 times more per acre. That's how you turn around a farm. You turn the family from stopping to be stubborn with each other to start being stubborn in the critical habits that matter. Start with decision making, start improving how we work together, turning character weaknesses from weaknesses into strength. Now, what excites me about this is I've dealt with the most dire situations across North America, and what excites me is that there's kids coming home from college, the family gets along really good, and they're starting to adapt this to take their family from good to great. So the next 20 years, farming with family is fun. I believe that anything you can do to improve the quality of decision making, when you think about it, it's going to skyrocket your farmer's profitability, and all that butting head's going to go by the wayside, and farming with family is fun. Why not do that for the first 20 years instead of being in your 40s and trying to fix things up? That, to me, is what makes sense. What does this have to do with succession planning? Because I was asked here to talk about succession planning. Well, the thing is, if your family's stubborn, you can't make simple production-related decisions, right, without bickering, if you're constantly butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, that what should be a 2-hour meeting to talk about a simple thing turns into a 10-year family feud. Succession planning is simply strategic planning. But if you have a family that is stubborn and can't make simple decisions together, how are you supposed to make a complex decision that's very emotionally charged? And the thing is that if you can improve how you make decisions together over a course of a year, take that from good to great. With this family, they had already spent $40,000 on accountant and lawyer's fees for succession planning. They didn't have a deal signed. That was part of the reason why the bank dropped them. They had some serious liability. There were a couple family members that had been working there for 20 years and been there when they went from a 2,000 acre operation. It was closer to a 20,000 acre operation, but I don't want to say who it is. They had been there. They didn't own the truck they drove. They didn't own the house they lived in. They owned nothing. $40,000 in legal fees. They couldn't make any decisions. They were constantly butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. We got it squared away as to how they make decisions together. 3 hours. We sat down in October. It was a 3-hour meeting. It was 2.5 or something like that. It was an afternoon. Again, 90-minute meeting. 2 weeks later, by Christmas, the deal was done. Not only that, there was a kid in vet school, and he was crying when I met him on the February 1st, that week of February 1st when he was leaning against the tractor tire. I'll never forget it. He was just freaking crying his eyes out. He was in vet college. He didn't want to be a vet. He wanted to farm. But his mother said, there's no future for you here. Because we got a succession deal in place and it's clear as to how he can earn equity over the next 20 years if he steps up, he knows with clarity as to what his proportion of the growth of that operation is going to be. That kid had top marks at vet college. He's not in vet school anymore. He's back home on the farm. I'm proud of that. Now, what's the third generation? I'm going to just give you a bit of my view on succession planning. What's the third generation curse? Does anybody know the third generation curse?
Family wealth is gone by the third generation.
So it takes one generation to start a farm, second generation to grow it, third generation pissed away. You guys never heard that story ever told, have you? But the thing is, how is it we spend, how many $1 million have been spent in aphid research in the Midwest in the last 20 years? Yet, the root issue of why family farms fail really never been looked into. And I think there's 3 things we got to look at differently. The first thing is character. I have been in a lot of meetings 15 years ago where we were doing succession planning, and the parents loved the kids. The kids worked hard. The kids worked really hard. And the parents wanted their kids to take over the farm. But there was a hesitation. There's always that hesitation to sign over equity to the next generation. That's because I don't care who you are, everybody's got 5% about them that's a character flaw. And now whether that's a drinking problem, or that's a deal with where you're passive aggressive and you procrastinate on decisions, all of these character traits causes family farms to fail. To me, it makes sense first, before you start talking about the transfer of assets, you focus on grooming a manager. And you take kids with potential to realize their full potential. To me, it makes sense to have a year period where you take a kid's character from good to great. So that you know that 2040, that farm is going to be still not only doing good, it's going to be doing great. Second issue. The truth is, for most succession planning, it's a hostile takeover. It's a hostile takeover where the old man's pushed off the farm. It happens when the sons or daughters are in the 30s and 40s, and the spouse says, look, you own nothing, you don't own the truck you drive, you don't own the farm you live on. You know, we got to pull an ultimatum here or else where are we going to be at? And unfortunately, succession planning happens, transfer of equity, and it all comes down to the one day it's a power struggle. One day it's a hostile takeover, a power struggle, whatever you want to call it. You may sell BS at church about how succession planning was for the better. But the truth is it's a power struggle. And that's because you had 20 years of butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. And there might be about a 6-month honeymoon after the transfer, the ink is dry, where dad's encouraged to come to the shop. And then there's a day that there's a frustration that happens. And it's like a pet peeve that's been there for over 20 years. And never got addressed. And at some point in time, Grandpa, who built up that empire, doesn't feel welcome in the shop. That is a dark but true secret about family farms. Right? And I believe that if you're going to be, I just want you to think about that cemetery that's 10 miles down the road from you. If you're going to be buried 10 feet from each other, why not get figured out how we can be 10 feet from each other every day and be stewards of the land together? How can we go from individuals, this is mine, this is yours, so it doesn't matter who owns more on paper in a safe. What matters is we're taking on the world together by eliminating those pet peeves. And the third thing I want to talk to you about is that any fool can give his son or daughter a tractor. Very few farmers are successful in teaching their kids how to make that tractor pay. Right? As a successful farmer, the more successful you are as a farmer, the harder it is for you to let go of control and to teach management wisdom. And that is because you're a doer, not a teacher. The reason why your high school principal down the road only has 20 cows and his farm is a joke is because he's good as a teacher, but he's not a very good a doer. The reason why you have a successful operation is because by personality trait, you're a doer. And it goes against your nature, your personality, to transfer the wisdom. And, you know, everybody needs a hand. You know, I'm a terrible tractor mechanic. You know, I need somebody to help me sometimes with tractor work. Why not get somebody to help you in an area that's your weekend? And to me, it makes sense. If you have a family meeting every 2 weeks, where all the generations are coming to the table with an idea to improve the operation. Has anybody ever seen a farm where somebody that's a bit controlling says no to their sons and daughters for about 20 years? And then the sons and daughters go do exact opposite what mom and dad said? Right? Dad had said white for 20 years, and so the son goes and does black. That's because the father was good at transferring assets, and then the farm gets ran into the ground. The father was good at transferring assets and saving $10,000 in taxes, but wasn't good in transferring wisdom. And to me, what makes sense is that if all generations sit down at the table and come to the table with new ideas every 2 weeks, now half the ideas will be good. And as a result, we improve the efficiency of the operation. Not only that, we up the organizational intelligence. We look at things different ways with our different personality types, and we improve how we do things. But then there's going to be some stupid ideas. And instead of just telling your kids, no, that's a dumb idea, we're not going to do it, you need somebody to force you to explain why, so that you can transfer the wisdom to your kids as to why the farm's been successful the way it has. So that you know in 2050, it doesn't matter who's got the reins of the organization. The family will be ran with the same success. Why give a piece of a pie to your kids? Why not give the recipe of what made that farm successful so that more growth can be developed as a result of that? Now, that's just my humble opinion. You got to check on what you know. And I want you to take two farms. One's a $40 million farm, and one's a $5 million farm. Okay? We all know that the $40 million farm has a bit of economies of scale. So they have, 3 to 5% potential for growth as far as competitive advantage for buying power, so on and so forth. Now, let's say that the $40 million farm, they leave this room and they don't change what they're doing. The $5 million farm does. The truth is today, both farms are butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. $40 million farm continues for the next 20 years, butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. $5 million farm, they take a little bit of humility and say, why don't we just take how we work together from good to great? Now, how do we go from, they go from butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, being on the same page, everybody pulling the same direction? I got 3 questions for you. The first question is this, is if the economy is wonky for the next 10 years, not that it's going to be wonky at all, but let's just say hypothetically that 7 out of 10 years, your cost of production is higher than what you're getting paid on the markets. Okay? My question is this, who's going to be able to make the adjustments to what they do to be able to survive? The family that's $40 million, but they're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions every day? Or the family that's $5 million, but they've gone from butting heads to being able to sit down and make decisions together, and everybody's pulling the same direction? My second question is this. When it comes to succession planning, whose lawyer bill is going to be cheaper? The family where they're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, and it's World War III when they sit down and do succession planning? Or the family that's able to sit down for an afternoon, make a few, listen to each other, and actually everybody comes to an agreement as to what they want to do. Everybody's pulling the same direction. My third question is this. What farm do you want to work on for the next 20 years? The family where everybody's butting heads and pulling the farm every day? Or the family that's able to sit down and make decisions together and everybody's pulling the same direction? I want you to think about one question as you come home today. Is stubborn making or breaking your farm? Is stubborn making or breaking your farm? What excites me is that families are not just coming to me now because they have a dysfunctional situation. They're coming to me because they want to avoid that. They want to go from good to great as to how they work together as a family. And you think about it, anything you can do to improve the quality of how you make decisions together as a family, it's going to skyrocket your farm's profitability, and all that butting heads is going to go by the wayside. And farming with family is going to be fun again. Thanks very much.